Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Heroes and Thieves. This here is the podcast where we take three random words in the English language and build fantasy, sci-fi, etc. worlds out of them. Let's see. My name is Greg.
My name's Michael.
And today, yet again, we are joined with another author, and we are so excited to have him on. Here we have Mr. Garrett K. Jones.
How's it going?
It's going all right.
It's going well.
It's a Tuesday, so I mean, it's as good as it can get, right?
It's a Tuesday. Yeah, it's a good day.
So Garrett here, real quick. Garrett here is the author of a series called The Archives of Icínq-Régn. He's a podcast host. He's a YouTube creator. And by all accounts, sounds like he's just a creative through and through. And we are so excited to have him on. From what I've seen of his work, of your work, Garrett, it seems like you just love the craft. So
yeah,
tell us a little bit about your background, about your books, your projects. What's going on with you?
The kind of the impetus behind everything that I've done with my book series has been, it all started off with me drawing all these comic book characters as a kid. I started designing them as far back as like 8th grade, continued working on them in high school. And then I came to the realization shortly after I graduated high school that I cannot draw to save my life. But I could tell a good story. So I started revamping a lot of the characters and taking them from their modern superhero, supervillain settings and retooling them for a medieval fantasy type genre. And a lot of the characters got very, very streamlined into what they are. And one of the characters in particular I had been really developing for about 4 years before I even started putting pen to paper. My freshman year of high school, I wrote this story, and it's very much like Tommy the Green Ranger meets Batman meets Iron Man.
Okay.
Dragon themed armor, anamorphic, capabilities, but he's a vigilante, and eventually that morphed into the basis for a ranger who's actually bonded with a dragon. So then a lot of the story point or plot points from that story that I wrote became the basis for what is the second book in my series.
Okay. So then, and when did you actually start putting pen to paper on this series?
So I started writing it between May and July of 2001. I was living in Japan as an exchange student.
All right.
And I just had a lot of time on my hands, a lot of access to notebooks and pens on a regular basis. And I just started writing. And the version that I had originally, the first draft of book one, or what would be book one, was really convoluted. I had one bad guy and like 9 protagonists. And it was so confusing even for me. I'm like, this is crap. I was going through rewrites and edits and second drafts, and by that point I was back in the States. I was going to college, and I took everything that I had been working on as far as like the actual narrative, chucked it into a barrel, set everything on fire, started over. Kept a lot of the character designs, but then the drafting phase, I went back to square one.
Yeah. So I love to hear that. And it's pretty common, I think, with a lot of authors where they say, I came up with my first character when I was just basically a child. And then that character kind of just lived in my head until finally when I guess a little more maturity, maybe writing skill caught up. And then, 5-10 years later is when this character that you've been living with finally gets put on paper and kind of made real. I think that's so cool. I love those stories. Those origin stories, I guess.
There's a lot of work that went into it because, one of the original iterations of that Ranger character, before he even had the look that he did my freshman year of high school, he looked like this weird mix between M. Bison from Street Fighter with Judge Dredd's helmet.
Oh, that's rad.
That's pretty cool.
That's a cool mix.
sounds
So yeah,
foolproof.
I got into the writing phase of it, and I ended up publishing the first book in 2001. I'm sorry, not 2001, 2015. Sorry. My brain and numbers do not work. And then about 2 years later, I published book two. And then later in 2017, I published book three, which I thought was really good of me to have two books out at the time. In the same year, because those two titles actually have overlapping story arcs, because there are scenes in book two that reappear in book three, but they're told from a different perspective. So you have the same characters involved, the same dialogue, but it's told from a different POV.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's-
It was a challenge for me, because then I had to go back to book two and be like, okay, got to make sure this is how it's
tough.
supposed to be.
Yeah,
Everything's tied together.
That's tough. I got a question for you. In this series, what would you say are some of the main themes? Do you have like main themes that you follow in your writing, or you just kind of do what you feel at the time?
A lot of authors, they go in with themes in mind, and it doesn't come about as like a conscious decision to put a theme in there.
Okay.
A lot of the time what I'm doing is I'm looking at focusing on character development and seeing how the characters evolve through the decisions that they're presented with. But like the first book is definitely this whole concept of embracing the calling that's ahead of you, and dealing with what can be considered destiny or fate, because the three title villains in book one, the heirs of Menenias, they are kind of locked into what they have to do because their father had been this ancient warlord. And so he made this prophecy. If they don't follow through on it, he tortures them from beyond the grave. Whereas the hero characters, and there's three of them as well, to kind of balance everything out, they all have different positions from which they come about, because one is like, I don't want to embrace this. I have no love for this. This is not my fight. Another one is he's gung ho for it until about midway through the story, when he realizes that he feels like he's being used by his mentors. And then there's a third one that she is having to do this because there's a burden of guilt that weighs upon her, because of a family legacy that is demonstrated at the beginning of the book. And so there's that. And then book two definitely is about, book two and three actually deal with more of having to deal with the ramifications of whatever decisions were made in book one.
Okay.
Right.
And then book four was kind of a catharsis for me, because I was working through some marital issues.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. But the newest book that's out, book five, which actually just came out about 2.5 months ago, it's called The Mantle of the Fatherless. And that one was definitely about fathers, and the importance of fathers in a child's life.
Yeah.
Whether they're a good father or a not so good father. And this kind of stemmed, it wasn't intentional, but it stemmed from dealing with the last couple of years going through custody battles with my ex-wife, and just, fighting to make sure that I could be in my son's life.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people who wouldn't be as adamant about doing that. But I know people who are adamant about, being in their kids' lives as much as possible. And for me, that was my goal, was to be there for him. And so this book was as much for him as it was for my father, who has always been, very present in my life.
That's really cool. I like that. I like that a lot, actually. I'm a father. I have 3 kids, and that'd be super important to me. If that happened, I would definitely do the same thing. So It sounds like you started with a concept as you grew up in your life, and then you kind of hit trials in your life and then adapted them to your series. Was that difficult for you, or was it just kind of flowed into this world that you had already created?
Actually, it wasn't so much like they kind of flowed back and forth between each other. And the reason being is because I was able to invest my time in developing the story. Mm-hmm. It gave me a way to work through whatever stress I was dealing with. A lot of people, whatever they're facing, like a lot of people, especially in the last few years with the pandemic and everything, you had people who had a lot of emotional baggage that they're dealing with, whether it was loss of a job, marital issues, depression, substance abuse, whatever it was, and there was no creative outlet for it. Right. Me, I'm the kind of person, if my parents grounded me and took away my privileges, I had no problem going to my room for the rest of the week because I could just lock myself in there. All I needed was a pad of paper and a pen or a pencil, and I could just write stuff out or draw or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it gave me an opportunity when I faced these things to just work through them. And the writing becomes kind of a moving meditation for me.
Yeah. That's incredible.
That's
cool.
And
I think you can tell too when you're reading a book, no matter what genre the book is, you can kind of tell when, in some sense, it becomes something of a diary, I guess, but a diary of not so much like this is what happened in my life, but kind of like emotions and morals and things like that. You can definitely sense that when it comes from an author. So, that's cool.
Absolutely. We, because I mean, every work of art, whether it's, a piece of music or, a painting, a drawing, poetry, a book, short story, it doesn't matter what it is. It reflects what is happening in the author's life or the creator's life to an extent, and it gives them that outlet for dealing with those things.
Yeah.
And what's funny though is I like to incorporate little nods to my personal experiences or to just these little inside jokes that I have. And so like in book 2, there's a pair of characters that I deliberately wrote using words, phrases, and dialogue that I've heard my parents use. And so they were supposed to be indicative of my parents. And my dad was reading it. This was in March of 2017. He was reading through the book, and he calls me up at about 10 o'clock at night. He's like, "Hey, I just read this passage. Did you base these characters off of me and your mom?" And I'm like, "Absolutely."
It's like, how'd you
That's
tell?
great. That's awesome.
That's funny.
Because it was the mannerisms, the way that the characters talked, and he was cracking up.
Yeah, I can only imagine like what would I write my dad as? Just a old grump every now and then. He's like, "God bless it."
Yeah,
that was his go-to when he got hurt. God.
I got one more, two more questions for you.
Okay.
Number 1, are you done with this series, or is there more?
I'm actually working on book 6 right now.
Okay.
And because book 5 actually jumps into a whole new generation of characters. So books 1 through 4.
Oh, gotcha.
That's generation 1. Book 5 picks up just a few months after the events of book 4, as far as the prelude of it. And then chapter 1 jumps ahead 20 years.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay. So there's a couple more you got in you left in this series.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely.
That's cool. And then my second question is, it's a 2-parter. Is this, are all of these books, they're pure fantasy, right?
Yes.
Have you thought about sci-fi writing or any other style of writing?
Actually, yeah. When I have moments where I feel like this itch to write something else to kind of break away, especially if I'm doing revisions and edits, I will jumpstart into other things. And so back in 2020, I wrote this well, actually, it started before 2020, but I wrote this short story called Salvage. It was part of a cyberpunk anthology that my best friend and I were starting to develop, and unfortunately, he hasn't written a single thing yet. But I wrote this first opening salvo, and it kind of sets the tone for everything else that's going, and it gave me an idea for a really cool cyberpunk sci-fi story that I in the back of my mind, it's there, it's on the back burner, and I'm thinking, okay, I'll come back to this at some point.
Yeah.
And then last summer, I was inspired to write a Lovecraftian style dark horror story, and that's actually getting published this next year in an anthology. But it's called Emily, and it's about the sailor who gets in a shipwreck. It's partially inspired by Herman Melville, partially inspired by Lovecraft. But what was fun was the real inspiration behind it was the Wilder Minds album by Mumford & Sons.
Okay.
And so I listened to that album on a loop, and there are words and phrases that are direct callbacks to the titles of the tracks. Or I use phrases from the lyrics within dialogue or narrative. And it was so much fun to write. Really stretched my creative abilities because it was something I hadn't written before. My mom's not into cosmic horror or horror of any kind, and I read it to her. She's like, "Wow, that's really good." Like, she was captivated. But then back in August, I got signed up for a microfiction challenge that kicked off in November. It was the NYC Midnight 250 word microfiction challenge.
Oh, cool.
And I ended up going to the second round. The first story I told was supposed to be suspense thriller, which was actually based on a memory of playing the game Sardines when I was a kid.
Yeah, terrifying game.
Yes, it is. The second prompt I got was for a ghost story, and to tell a ghost story in 250 words is a bit of a challenge. But I turned off all the lights in my house. I hunkered down in front of my computer, and I wrote out this piece that it deals with this young woman working as a librarian clerk. She's putting away books after hours in the children's reading room, and all of a sudden spooky things start happening, and it doesn't go well for her.
That's fun. 250 words is not a lot. That's not a lot.
No, it's not.
That, and doing that story actually prompted me to start working on another project that's currently codenamed Ghost Protocol. But it's dealing with like a series of hauntings in my local area, because I don't know if you guys saw the season premiere of Ghost Hunters that just aired a few weeks ago, but they actually filmed here where I live.
Nice.
And yeah, they were here back in September. And then there's a show on Netflix called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's got this psychic named Tyler Henry who got really popular with the Kardashians.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He's originally from my town.
Huh.
And so one of the characters that I've been developing is inspired by him.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's fun. My wife and I used to watch Ghost Hunters, all the time.
Yeah.
And then she couldn't do it much longer because she's afraid. So we stopped watching it.
She got too scared.
Her thing was, if I watched one episode of that, she'd have to watch 2 episodes of something lighthearted and fun, or like, Lifetime. Hallmark. Yeah. Lifetime. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. So
my ex-wife got really into watching Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
And it would drive me nuts, especially like when they would talk about like things coming out of the Bible, because my master's degree is in biblical studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so like she'd be watching it on, reruns on Netflix or Hulu or whatever. And all of a sudden, like I'd be sleeping. It's like 2:00 in the morning. TV is still on. So I'm not fully in like REM sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I just remember waking up randomly every time one of these episodes played. And I'd be like, that's out of context. That's out of context. Just shouting at the TV.
Yeah.
I would wake her up from a dead sleep. And I'm like, I'm sorry. They're wrong.
It just came to
Sorry,
me.
but they're wrong. Yeah. That's funny.
That's funny. I think we might dive into that a little bit throughout the episode here, because Michael and I are both big into. We use the Bible a lot as inspiration for a lot of our worlds, and so I think we might dive back into that. But let's get into these words.
Okay,
So
sounds good.
Let's build a world real quick using these 3 words. And so word number 1, I want to hit you guys with.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Word number 1 is double.
Ooh. Double. I like it. That's a good word.
I know. Thank you.
It means,
I thought of it myself.
You were looking at a package of Double Bubble, weren't you?
I was actually looking at a double-sided notebook, I think it was.
So let me ask this question for us here. Let's set this stage. When he says double, without looking up the actual meaning of double, I'm not a word guy. Is it 2 of the same thing, or just 2, or like one thing? You know what I mean? Like, is it 2 of one thing, or is it
usually double means it's in tandem? There's a pair, or it could mean identical duplicates.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was getting towards. Is it a pair
there's
of
a little
things or 2 of the
leeway.
same thing? Yeah.
There's a little leeway with the etymology there.
Okay. So,
What do you got?
what do I got for double? Okay, we're building a world based off of the word double. So immediately,
let me back up, because
Yeah.
I think I may need to be refamiliarized with the rules.
Go
here.
ahead, yeah.
Now, are we developing a world based on each word, or are we using all 3 words to develop one world?
yeah. So it goes. Yeah, we start with the first world and we build this first layer, and then he introduces number 2, and then it could get weird
Okay.
from there. So we have to build
One
on
world.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's one world. And usually how it starts is that I throw out something ridiculous, and then everybody else just fixes it. So
My thought going into this, using the word double, could allow for multiversal, or at least an alternate reality,
okay.
alternate dimension.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something that we can incorporate into the story, because that gives itself to so many things. Because in fantasy, you could have alternate dimensions where higher beings live, or in if we go strictly sci-fi, a secondary universe where things are more or less the same. It's a double,
Yeah.
but they're parallel to each other.
Now, the question I like to ask is, when talking about parallel universes, if we're incorporating this, do the people in our world know it exists, number 1, and number 2, have we traversed that already? Is there like going back and forth between these worlds?
That's a good question. With us being the creators, let's take a vote.
Yeah. I like an idea where there's always this opportunity to go back and forth between realms. I don't know how that would work in our world, but I'm a fan of, being able to come in and out as we want. This just came to me. I'm just going to say this. We can just shoot it down if we want.
Go ahead.
There's a movie, and this is going to be really bad because I don't remember the name of the movie, but it's a movie. I think it's by Jordan Key or something.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that.
Where it's like, there's a copy of every person ever that lives in the subway or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? Us. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, with Lupita Nyong'o.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just thinking of that when you guys were talking.
Like,
Because that's like a double, but there's no other plane.
There's no other world.
Dimensions.
It's
there's no
the same
magic.
one. Yeah.
Right. It's just
they're just
it's
like
all
locked
very
away.
Physical. They're just
For some
kind
reason.
of locked away.
Yeah. I don't know if that's what we want, but in that world, they know that. Well, did they know, or are they finding out?
Some of them did know. It was what was interesting is like the doppelgangers or the duplicates were like they still went through the same motions as the people on the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sorry about that. I was starting to get a random call. Yeah, they still went through the same motions. So like if everyone sat down to eat, the duplicates were eating, but they didn't have, chicken or burgers or pizza or anything. They had live rabbits.
Right.
And they just started consuming the rabbits.
It was like a bizarre thing in that one.
Yeah, it was like this weird tethering effect.
Yeah.
But there is a series that was on, I want to say Showtime or HBO. It was on cable somewhere a few years ago, where there was an alternate. There existed an alternate Earth, and only government agents could pass in between to this other alternate version of reality.
Okay.
And it was kind of interesting how and the whole purpose was like to stop like some kind of like terrorist organization from doing something, or it was like an alternate history. I can't remember all the ins and outs. My dad tried to explain it to me, and I went cross-eyed.
Yeah.
But he was also trying to explain it to me like 10 episodes in. I'm like,
Yeah,
it's too late.
Yeah.
I do like the idea though of maybe we could use this is something of like a government or a kingdom or just like the ruling, I guess, government body being the ones who are familiar with and able to go between or kind of control this double, whether we decide it's another dimension or like the people in Us, the only people they bottleneck entry into that realm, if that makes sense. I think that is an interesting concept.
oh, absolutely. I think it would play in well, especially if you're doing something that's, science fiction based, because it would have to be someone in charge to make sure that the there we go. Finally got my camera working again. It would actually make sense that the government would be in charge of any passage going back and forth, because you'd have to limit it. Because what happens if, for example, you have like just some random file clerk come walking through, they see the doorway and they're like, oh, where's this go? I'm on my lunch break. I don't have anywhere to be. They pass through, and then like momentarily they see like another version of themselves walk by. That would freak everybody out.
Yeah.
If you weren't aware of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I like that they would be in control and monitoring that. So is there stuff to gain from each side? Is there a reason people would go back and forth? Is there resources that one doesn't have for some reason that the other does to make it kind of interesting for like needs to go back and forth?
What if it was like that Jet Li movie?
The one,
right? The one.
Oh, dude, that's such a good movie.
That movie was good.
Right? It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Where if you can kill the other, like your duplicate, you gain their
You
power,
gain
you
the
become
strength of them.
stronger.
That's a cool idea.
Maybe not, but
That's a
I
cool
just love
idea.
that movie. It's my childhood.
Yeah, because I like this premise we have going so far. I just want there to be a reason, some intrigue behind the portal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the way you could play it off is that the alternate version has become technologically more advanced.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, if you're looking at the types of civilizations right now, human beings, even in the 21st century, we are a type 0 civilization. We don't have interstellar travel. We haven't figured out how to reach higher planes of existence. We're still very much at war with each other over resources rather than trying to find ways to work together. If anything, we focus more on the disparities and the differences than we do on what we have in common.
Exactly.
And that seems to be pressed and pushed more and more as an agenda, especially amongst people who are working in government and leadership. So given that, it would make sense that it would be kind of a neat thing to see if that alternate civilization, that alternate version of Earth, having more technological advancements, because then it could be an issue of sharing resources and technology. So like maybe they've hit a point where certain resources they need to further their technology are no longer available, but they're still available on Earth A.
Okay. Yeah.
But Earth A does not have the technological know-how to advance to that level. So there's a sharing of technology and a sharing of resources.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. I like that idea because then it kind of adds, it can add a lot of friction too when technology or Dimension B starts to find out like, hey, this is stuff we're going to need to advance, and yet we're giving it to you.
We're just giving it away.
So we, at some point, we need to figure out how to do this ourselves so we don't fall too far behind by giving you the stuff we're gonna need. Which that'll be could be a fun story to tell, down the line.
Question.
Yeah.
So we're talking about this other dimension. Is there only how can you enter and exit the dimensions? Is there only like certain points in the world, or is it anybody can do it, or are there gateways?
I saw it like a Stargate, to be honest. That was in my mind.
That's what I was imagining.
It's like a wavy water portal.
Sure we're all on the same page here.
Well, we could also, I mean, especially if you go through like the cosmological type stuff or ancient alien theorists or whatever, ley lines would make for good, because you could have nodes that are accessible at various points around the world, but only a handful of them are accessible at the surface.
Yeah.
And so maybe Area 51 is actually one of those nodes, or the facility was built around that node to protect it from the general population.
That could work.
Obviously,
instead of it being aliens, it's been technology that's been coming through that portal that they've been testing and failing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I like that.
So how far advanced is the other civilization then? Because I was thinking like they're 50 years ahead, but are we talking like they have space travel established and we're just like we are now? Or what's the disparity between the advancement?
That's a good question, because like I like the idea of, because if you go back to like looking at the huge leaps in technology that we've had over just the last 80 years,
right?
You're looking at science fiction. We had massive jumps from where we were just a century ago to where we are now. Because like 1923, we barely had working radios that could broadcast a signal nationwide. We barely figured that out. We didn't even have telephones that ran that far. We had, we were still using telegraph and Morse code.
Right.
Telephones didn't really come about until the 1930s. And that's when they came into more heavy use. And it progressed from there. The fact that we're at a point where now we have, worldwide communications at the drop of a hat instantaneously. I mean, the technology that we're using right now for video chat was Star Trek stuff in the 1960s.
Exactly.
Right.
No one even thought that this was possible.
Yeah.
Although I'm still really waiting for my hoverboard. Robert Zemeckis owes me money on that.
Right.
But we could have, like, say, the more resource-rich, technologically disadvantaged Earth could be like set 1940s, 1950s, just coming out of World War II.
Okay.
And maybe the atom bomb had been used as a first test of new technology coming through that portal. We couldn't figure out how to work it the way it was supposed to work, but we could turn it into a weapon.
Of course, yeah.
But then have the Civilization B or Earth B be, I'd say, closer like 2100.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then in that case, it is like alien technology. If like basing on reality right now, 2100,
Yeah.
there's going to be some incredible stuff, I hope.
Well, I mean, Arthur C. Clarke said it best. Any technology that cannot be explained right away is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would feel like magic. I mean, if you guys have seen the movie Prey, think about the Comanche girl who's seen that predator for the first time.
Yeah.
She's thinking, okay, he's a ghost, he's a demon, he's something supernatural,
Right.
and he's just using really advanced technology that she
it's
can't
his
even
tech.
conceive of.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So it will be
Okay.
very alien magical to these people. That's cool. I like it.
Okay, so then right now we've got we're talking basically an alternate Earth, and we have the two Earths, Earth A, Earth B. Earth A is living kind of in the 1940 time frame. Earth B about 2100, and they are starting to connect and communicate with each other and trade things. So
Cool.
this is a good start. Word number 2.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Word number 2 is wit. W-I-T.
Wit.
Wit.
Gotta be
Intelligence, cleverness,
God,
intuition.
witty.
Cleverness, stuff like that. Yep. So
Yeah, I'm trying to.
This feels like a great place to insert a character, perhaps the hero character.
Yeah.
possibly, yeah. This could very easily be a personality trait of somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm thinking this could be someone who is whip smart, very, very street savvy, but you get this opportunity to see him develop skills against something that he can't hope to match. Maybe he's from that Earth A civilization, that 1940s, and he's having to deal with technology coming through that portal because it's more harmful than it is good for us because we don't have the morality to use it properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me
I have
hit
something
you
way
real
off
quick.
topic, so I'll wait till you
Yeah,
ask.
I know what you're going to go wild.
I got something.
Let me
Just
say something normal first.
yeah, okay.
Actually, this is normal. Just I thought of an idea. So you're talking about kind of a main character who's got a lot of wit. Obviously, they're pretty independent. They're a main character, but I'm imagining just off the top of my head. I think something that I would like to see would be like we talk about these ley lines. This character, it's 1940s, so obviously fighting in World War II. Because everybody was at that time. No, this person's in World War II or somehow entrenched and affected by it, and happens to stumble upon one of these central areas of the ley line, like a portal, basically. And that is how this character is introduced to the alternate world and stumbles upon it. And in my mind, enters into the world. So is now on the alternate Earth.
So that actually, you just clicked something in my head. What if he's an intelligence operative either, and we could make him either, someone working for the Germans who's, doing a little bit of espionage in the United States, making him kind of if we wrote it in a first person perspective, it would be someone who would be an untrustworthy narrator.
Right.
The other option is we could have it as being an intelligence operative or just even a basic grunt soldier from the Allies who gets thrown in a node in Europe or the Pacific Theater.
To me, the German unreliable narrator, that would be compelling. I feel like, because obviously we have, looking into the past, we have the 2020 vision of, what went wrong for Germany.
So I just want to ask a clarifying question here. It is that we're set in different dates. So Earth 1, Earth A is at 1940. Earth B is in the future. It's not a parallel exact. They're not just advanced technologically, but in the same timeline. They're just,
I would say I would say that it would be fun to play with that and say, like, they're counting the years the same, but just the advancement of technology has gone so much farther on that alternate Earth.
So
that would make more sense.
Are they not then, because their mindset is different, right? Humanity's at a different place. Are they not in a world war situation?
They wouldn't be by that point, but it's probably something that they've dealt with in their respective past.
Yeah, at some point in their technological advancement, this happened. So he would be getting some. It wasn't like, yeah, we did the same thing. It's just like we went through hardship like you are, and this is how we dealt with it. It wasn't like just seeing the future.
That's a good point
thing,
because they're not actually in the future. They just got to the advancements quicker.
It would feel like going through that portal would feel like, wow, I just jumped ahead in time, but they are in the same time frame. Just they're more advanced.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fun.
So that's what I'm imagining kind of as a character for a book, is that's how kind of would be the entrance to the hero's journey, right? That would be the call, would be stepping through this portal as an not unwitting, because he is full of wit, but unknowing character.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Michael? You were going to hit us with some hot take?
Well, it was not a hot take. It's just a curveball, more like. It was kind of like what you kind of went with, but mine was, there are these like freedom fighter type people on Earth B who are more advanced, that are somehow there's warnings to the environment or something happening in their world that they've been trying to get across to our world. Like, yeah, advancement's great, but look at what's happening now to us. So this group of like freedom fighters are trying to get through the portal or different portals, right? And they're trying to then like warn us instead of just like, hey, give us resources. It's like, rogue agents coming through and trying to, tip people off that all this isn't as good as you might think it is. Like, slow down, enjoy what you have, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So really in the vein of what we're talking about, but it's another idea for the world.
They could be connected. That's a little inspiration from like Terminator.
Exactly. Yeah. Like agents coming through and like trying to warn people, hey, this is not great.
Yeah.
Just a thought. But that does not do it.
It would be interesting to see if maybe there is a faction that uses an alternate portal beyond the main one at Area 51.
Yeah.
And they're coming through at different places. And like, for example, the United States is not the only place that's getting good technology. Maybe it's
right.
Maybe it's Japan is starting to get some good technology as well. Because I mean, if you look at Japan and their advancement, they went from being almost like a third world country by the end of World War II to being the first world nation that they are now.
Yeah.
And there's some and I mean some of the technology that they have, like case in point, when I was there 22 years ago, they were already dealing with how to put MP3s into a pocket long before we even started thinking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, their phones were their cell phones were way more advanced than we had. Huge jumps. And so like I'm thinking back to Marty McFly and Doc Brown in the 1950s going, oh, it's made in Japan. It's, yeah, dude, Doc, all the best stuff is made in Japan.
Yeah. Right. That's true. Maybe they actually do have a portal.
They have a real portal.
Yeah.
Or it could be some location in South Korea, like Seoul, for example, because South Korea has taken a huge leap in technology as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just an idea.
I like those ideas. I like putting those portals
Super
other
cool
places.
locales,
And, you know, more people's getting this tech.
But the other thing that we need, though, if we're gonna play off the hero's journey, we need to have an antagonist.
Yep.
So that begs the question: who's going to be, or what is going to be the antagonist?
Well, of course, it's going to be the Earth B version of the same person, right? He finds out that he is the biggest. Also, and I don't know. I'm just
That's too coincidental. That's
coincidental out of everyone in the world. Yeah, that he's the hero and the villain. That would be.
Yeah, that actually could be a lot of fun, actually, because what if the Earth B version of the protagonist is one of those on his side that's able to cross over? He comes to our Earth that in the 1940s, he sees what is happening, what his doppelganger is a part of, and the travesties that are happening in Europe at the time.
Mm.
And he's like, screw this. There's no way their version of Germany is going to get this tech.
Okay. Yeah. That'd be fun.
Because then you could do the cat and mouse spy versus spy thing. And, you know, and there's a fun little twist that you can do with it. The closer they get in proximity, the more they start to sync up as far as their thoughts and their abilities.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to write.
There would be some crossover.
That's fun.
And you start, you can like feel kind of what they're feeling as you get closer and closer. Yeah.
I like that. I like that.
That might be cool. I feel like within that, if you were to write a book about this within that story, I feel like at some point they would get together and they would feel like a kinship, right? Because they are essentially the same person. So you'd immediately be like, we're allies, we're bros. But as you go further, you realize that the intentions are completely different. And then, you know, reaches the climax, the breaking point where decisions have to be made. That could be a compelling story for sure.
And I've got a fun twist here for you guys that you guys will get a kick out of.
Yeah.
They work together, and because the Earth A version realizes that his doppelganger on Earth B has a family.
Okay.
He killed himself without leaving that family fatherless.
Oh.
And then he realizes just how bad it would be if he took that technology back to his world and to his version of Germany where that's at war.
Yeah.
So he helps destroy that primary portal. But in the process, the Earth B doppelganger gets mortally wounded. So and because they've shared that connection, those memories, those thoughts, he's able to take over and carry on and cover for that family.
That's fun.
Ooh.
I like that one. That'd be a major
rough,
twist.
though.
That'd be major. Like you're stealing someone's life, right? But essentially you are that person anyway. So like, what is the morality there? Like what's...
and it works because the mission that he was sent on by Berlin would have been a suicide mission anyway.
Yeah.
So you know, on Earth A, he's dead.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, he has nothing to
explosion.
lose there.
Yeah.
So he'd be willing to take that jump.
That'd be fun. That's a fun time. But yeah, that would be a weird transition. Even though he gained like a lot of, you know, experiences and stuff from being close, it's still like it'd be a transition for him.
It's still never exactly the same.
It'd be tough.
Yeah, but think about that though. I mean, think about how many people have, you know, some kind of you know, psychological disconnect because of something. And it could just be, and like the doctor be like, well, maybe he had a seizure or something.
Yeah. Like it was a very traumatic thing he went through.
Yeah, he came back, he's got shell shock.
Yeah.
You know?
That
PTSD.
accounts for the problems. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. I like that. Good twist.
All right, before you guys get too comfortable, let's jump to word number 3.
Okay.
Okay, last word. And this word is name. Name.
Name. Oh, what's in a name?
Gunter.
Gunter, yeah. No, if we just name him and call it, that's lame. We're not doing that.
All right, wrap it up. We're done.
We're done here. We named him.
He makes a really good cup of coffee
Yeah.
on one trip to New York.
That's funny.
Name. Yep.
My thought on this is maybe he has maybe our character has an ancestor who goes back, centuries, who was at least on Earth A would have been some kind of war hero. Because, at the time, Germany was really big about, hey, let's take a look at your ancestry and see who was heroic so you could live up to that legacy.
Mm-hmm. That brings me, let me propose another little story point to you guys, story beat here. What if in the past, these ley lines occurred and happened only at a point in time? They were not always there. So at some point in the history of these two worlds, they were converged. And so you could say that ancestor was the same ancestor, same person for both. And that ancestor, and somehow, I don't know how to incorporate it, but somehow knowing that would empower them, or it would do something to the.
The story. You're talking about having a. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not impetus. It's But yeah, I get what you're saying. There's like a singular. It's a single focal point where everything diverged into
the two
realities.
Worlds. Yeah, the two realities. Yeah,
that could be a lot of fun.
Which that would be its own. You could write all the lore you want about how that happened somewhere in the past. Like, I don't want to, not right now. That's I feel like it's another episode, but. Name. Because you were talking about the ancestor, maybe that ancestor was somebody who was there to witness whatever that event was. And somehow there's some sort of power in that, or there's something behind it that can connect these two men or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's my thought on.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun, because I'm trying to think back. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to do the research, but like I was thinking, maybe like one of the Teutonic Knights of from the Second Crusade.
Oh, you're going way back. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be a lot of fun, because what if that during the Crusades, especially on Earth B, what if that was that focal point for their part of the civilization, where they're like, hey, wait a minute. We've been spending all this time fighting these wars. Let's unite.
Okay.
Oh, and that's where the divergence.
And that's where things begin to diverge. The ancestry stays the same.
Oh, that's genius too. You know why? Because my history is not great, but I think I'm right on this one. Let me shoot this one out. But at some point in history, down in like the northern Africa, where a lot of the Crusades, the Saudi Arabia area, when basically the Muslims at some point in history were technologically so advanced, and their civilization was pretty large. Their empire was pretty large. And at some point, they were coming out with all sorts of just great contributions to the world.
Yeah.
And so what you were saying, where instead of going to war, these nations instead put their heads together and said, let's create a better world. That would very easily explain how they are 200 years ahead.
It's a good time period shift right there.
Yeah.
Because going going back, because like the caliphate that was established by Muhammad rose about in the mid 8th century AD, and huge advancements, especially in mathematics and science.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they were the ones who. It was the Muslims who developed algebra. Thank you for developing that. But that led to all these other forms of higher mathematics that developed technology. That technology is centered around. But then, if you look at like the Mongol Empire historically spread culture around the world. Mm-hmm. Like they were like one of the first multicultural empires, and they did far more to advance culture than the Romans did, because the Romans were advancing Roman culture. Mm-hmm. The Mongols were advancing multiple cultures simultaneously, and they covered. They had the largest territory of any empire on the planet. Now, imagine you had that kind of network with unity and the scientific advancements going on in the Middle East around that same time. And then you had that westward and outward expansion from the old world to the new world and beyond. Things would it would be a domino effect.
Yeah.
Things would develop exponentially.
They'd be advanced just like they ended up being. That's great. That's a great, like, actual history tie. So that's fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with name, but it doesn't matter.
But I mean, like he was alluding to before, like these people at that time could have been like the great, great, great grandfathers of these things, and somehow tying to them is important.
Right. And so the reason why I thought about the Teutonic Knights is the Teutonics were a German-based society.
Oh, okay.
And so if we have a character who's coming out of Germany on both sides of that portal, it would make sense that he would have some ancestor who was a part of that organization.
Yeah. That's cool. That's a lot of fun. This is a fun thing. I like it.
That's a cool world. I like this a lot. Yeah, that divergence point, I think, that's rad.
Yeah, and it would probably work in this story that you could write about. Well, cool. We actually got a nice thing here, a nice base here for something fantastic.
Yeah, see, it always works out. Just got to give it time.
Always works out.
This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know. We love doing it. All right. Well, I think we're good right here. Unless either of you have any last additions or touch-ups to this world we want to talk about.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think given more words or just, actual time to research, I think we could go for a long time on this one.
Oh, yeah.
This one's been fun. Okay, well then, yeah, again, this one has been a lot of fun. I love doing this, just a little quick creative exercise, take some words, build a world, especially with guest authors who bring, a lot of knowledge, a lot of historical knowledge. It's fun to see how it all comes together. Anyway, again, thank you, Garrett, again for coming on. It's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, this is a blast.
It's been great for me too. I love getting to talk shop with people.
Yeah,
and to work through it. It's like workshopping stuff like this is so much fun. Like this kind of reminds me of like sitting around like reading Wizard magazine and with buddies and looking at the like the casting calls that they do for popular comic IPs at the time. Like just all the possibilities are just so much fun.
Yeah, it really is. So again, thanks for joining us today. Thanks everybody for listening. For Greg and Garrett, I'm Michael. That's it for today. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.